Alex, that was great. I mean, Georgia is an example of how a country should be run economically. But unfortunately, we in Pakistan are still in the waiting game. Okay, my title today is, will this be the last of Pakistan's IMF program? Day before yesterday, I picked up the newspaper, which is a very well-known paper here, the International News. And the top story in the news by Mehtab Haider, he's a well-known writer on economic matters, and I read him regularly. The top story was, higher tax rates resulted in less tax revenues, IMF told. The Laffer curve is basically the thought behind the relation of tax rates and tax revenues. And I am presenting you the Laffer curve. Now, the Laffer curve was basically the idea not actually founded by Dr. Laffer, but it was founded by a Muslim scholar in the 14th century. And that scholar was Ibn Khaldun. And in the Muqaddama, there's a section on economics, and he says, in the beginning of the dynasty, you have low tax rates and high revenues. But at the end of the dynasty, you have high tax rates and very low revenues. That's the idea behind the Laffer curve. It's a trade-off between tax rate and tax revenues. What you see here is, on the gray side, it's the prohibitive range in terms of tax rates. That means when you start from zero, and at zero you have zero revenues. Obviously at zero you're not going to have any revenues. At 100% you also will have zero revenues, because at 100% nobody will be working and there will be no tax collection. So when you start moving up on your tax rate, let's start from 1%, 2%, 3% onwards. So basically what the Laffer curve says, that for every dollar or every million or any billion that you want to get, you have a rate of 1% if it equals 1 million. And when you go from 1% to 2%, and the expectation is 2 million, which probably would be 2 million, and then when you move up the Laffer curve, 5, 10, 15, then you'll get the same 5, 10, 15 million. But there's a point where there's a conflict between the tax rates that are in the prohibitive range and the range where normally you start with. So the first effect of moving up the tax curve, the Laffer curve, is the theoretical rate that economists use to think that they're going to be increasing on the tax revenues. But when you come to the point beyond and starting moving up the prohibitive range, so basically for every percentage of rate that you increase, doesn't necessarily give you that 1 million or 1 billion in revenues. So the further you go up the Laffer curve, you will soon find that your dollar per dollar in terms of percentage versus the dollar, the rate of your revenues start diminishing. So what we need to be is always at the rate where it's below the prohibitive rate. Now you have to realize that the part where they collide doesn't mean that you are at 50%. It doesn't mean you're 50%. That could be any range from 40 to 50. And currently, we in Pakistan are way up there. I mean, probably somewhere between where the Laffer curve conflicts up, probably somewhere midway there. So there's no wonder that today, with more tax increases day by day, we're finding ourselves getting less revenues. The IMF loans are tied to structural adjustment programs based on excessive austerity benchmarks. This is IMF. Whether it's IMF here or it's IMF in another country in Africa, wherever, this is basically their idea that you have to reach benchmarks. So basically what they're looking for is tax revenue targets, which means basically tax increases. Then they look for the fiscal consolidation, which is basically and reforms for a stronger, more inclusive and resilient growth. This is typical IMF, whether you're meeting them in Washington or you're meeting them in any capital city. This is something I hear all the time in Pakistan. We have this boom and bust cycles. can only come, as Mr. Alex has mentioned in his speech, is lower tax rates on a broad tax base. No exemptions, no deductions, no exclusions. There should be few taxes, and Georgia is an example of a country where they chose to just keep 6 few taxes. And income should be taxed only once. And the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to have a flat tax regime. The flat tax is the fair tax, and it's a simple tax, and it's a predictable tax. So I've always suggested in several of my speeches at Prime that I believe that the best rate for corporates in Pakistan should be 20%, and it should be flat. On income, it should be 10% and flat. And on sales, it should be 5% and flat. So people and businesses have the least incentive to evade, avoid, or not report taxable income. You guys following me? Capish? Okay. The next area is government spending. Government spending, as the late Milton Friedman, the famous monetary economist, said, is nothing but taxation. Government spending is taxation. And in Pakistan, we see that we have a government spending which is excessive and wasteful, which always leads to regular budget deficits and higher government borrowing, which also leads to higher debt service payments. And in Pakistan, we are in a situation where we are actually paying more to service external debts than receiving in new external finance, which I call net negative transfers. Did you guys get that? I'm saying it again. This is very much for Pakistan. Paying more to service external debts than receiving in new external finance. So there is no fiscal space for any development of any sort for Pakistan at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, Pakistan is bankrupt. The other third area is free trade. Now, free trade benefits all: importers, exporters, consumers, producers, and promotes economic growth. Low tariffs lead to gains from trade by increasing total trade. That means it increases exports and imports. That's what low tariff does, is increase your total trade for the economy. Protected tariffs, it's a no-brainer. It invites evasion and crime. And then we have this myth of trade deficit. Trade deficit is not a major issue, because actually a trade deficit also happens to be capital surplus. If you had seen Alex's thing he had on the thing, you saw that Georgia's exports were something like about half or 1/3 of the total imports. That's not a situation to worry about, because at the end of the day, a good portion of that imports was probably the capital imports that the country did in terms of foreign investment, etc., etc. I mean, it's common sense. The other area is sound money, and monetary and fiscal policies are very closely aligned. So one should have a monetary policy with slow money growth, which basically means the quantity of money. That's M3 in monetary policy. We should have low interest rates, and interest rates is nothing but the price of money. It's just the price of money. To ensure a level playing field for all businesses, period. Privatization. SOEs are a huge net drain on fiscal solvency. And we have plenty of federally owned SOEs in Pakistan. And you said yesterday there were about maybe high elevated debt, low reserves, gross financing needs, and lastly and very importantly, challenging socio-political